A word of warning, this podcast explores graphic and disturbing stories and includes some strong language. It therefore may not be suitable for our young listeners or other folks who may find it disturbing. Hello and welcome to True Crime News, the podcast covering high-profile and under-the-radar cases from across the country every week. I'm your host, Ana Garcia. Our case this week, well, we know for sure that the mushrooms in the beef Wellington they ate were poisonous because 3 people died and 1 other came quite close. But the question before the jury was this: did the hostess who forged those mushrooms know they were poisonous before she served them to her former in-laws? And why is she the only one who didn't get sick? After 9 weeks of testimony and 1 week of deliberations, the verdict is in and the jury declares it's murder. We are recording this on Friday, July 11th of 2025. Our guest today is Bobby Chacon, a former FBI agent, a writer, and a commentator that you can catch on just about every news outlet. Bobby, welcome back. It's so good to see you again.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me back.
And for those of you who are watching on YouTube, a few things. If you notice that Bobby has a sling on, he's had some shoulder surgery. So thank you for joining us at this time of recovery.
Sure. Thank you.
Absolutely. And one more thing that we're going to talk about a little later. It's just a silly little thing. But if you notice this gorgeous, gorgeous birdhouse behind me, Mike King, one of our contributors, delivered it to me last night. I'll show it to you all later. Isn't it fabulous? He makes it from everything he finds. He calls it junk. He finds junk and he now makes birdhouses. So there you go.
That's awesome.
All right, let's get started with this case today. It is out of Morwell, Australia. It has been making international headlines ever since 50-year-old Erin Patterson was arrested for cooking up a deadly batch of beef Wellington, which had toxic mushrooms that she apparently picked herself. The guests invited for this home-cooked meal were the relatives of her estranged husband, which of course was strange to police. And now the ex, he had also been invited to the lunch, but he said, you know what, we're really not getting along that well. I feel really weird. I don't want to go to this lunch. Bobby, that man not showing up for this homemade meal literally saved his life.
Yeah, and not only his life, but a horrible way to die. Because I read some of the accounts of how you die from this kind of poisoning. It's days and days of pain, torture, vomiting, diarrhea. I mean, and they can't do anything about it. And it's just a horrible, horrible way to die. And so, he saved himself from a grave ordeal.
He did, but he lost his parents in the process, and also his aunt and uncle. I mean, that man, his uncle survived. Yeah, the uncle survived, correct. But that's 3 relatives right there.
Yeah, brutal. And seemingly motiveless because they've been estranged for quite a while. It didn't seem like they were going through a very acrimonious divorce currently or a bitter child custody dispute. It really seems odd. We've seen, exes lash out at their former spouses and things, but this one was so detached. It was so long a time period, and there didn't seem to be a lot of anger and hatred currently going on between the 2 of them. And then additionally to target his parents and his aunt and uncle, it just seems like next level bizarre to me.
It is. And prosecutors said that they didn't have a motive in this case. You generally, even in Australia, you don't have to prove a motive when you present your case. And in this one, they didn't even try. It didn't. The question was this intentional or was this an accident? And she kind of said that it was an accident, but she didn't do that until days later after telling several other stories, And I think if it's really an accident, you get right in front of it and you just like, oh my God, and you would be at the hospital telling them exactly what you made and where you found the mushrooms, right? And
it was lie after lie. It was a typical thing that some of these suspects do is they tell a lie and then they wait. And then the police come back and they confront the lie. And then they try to escape the lie by telling another lie. And then they debunk that lie. And then there's this series of lies. And after a while, you're just making yourself look more guilty with each lie that you tell. So sometimes if you cover up the first lie, you can say, oh, the person was panicked, but lie after lie after lie, and then it just adds up. And then, the authorities just go, there's a reason for this. They start looking at you harder as they did here. And certainly they uncovered a lot of evidence.
They really did. So Erin Patterson, who's 50 years old, has been found guilty of killing 3 members of her ex-husband's family, including his parents, Don and Gail Patterson, both 70, as well as Gail's sister, Heather Wilkinson, who was 66, and then the attempted murder of her husband, Pastor Ian Wilkinson, who 68, survived and was able to testify about what happened that night and how horrible it was for him. You know, he tells a really interesting story here, Ian does. He explained how before lunch they prayed, and then at the end of the gathering they prayed again. He also describes how when Erin presented the homemade beef Wellington, which is not an easy thing to make here. If I mean, it's got the beef and the mushrooms and the sauce, and then it's got the puff pastry. I mean, it's a lot of work, this thing. So, he said it was so interesting when she brought the plates out. Hers was a different color than the rest. Hello, ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, he probably didn't think much of it at the time, but then looking back at the whole circumstances, sure. And in fact, I think she put a plate together for her husband in case he showed up, and
Yes.
she put that in the refrigerator or the freezer or something. So she was still hoping that he would show up and hoping to kill him as well. And I think all of their plates were gray and hers was orange. So
Yes.
she definitely wanted to make sure she did not mix up their food with her food.
Absolutely. And of course, she is the only one who did not get ill, even though several days later, after everybody's fighting for their lives in the hospital, she goes to the hospital, claims she's not feeling well, but she doesn't really have any symptoms. And police say when they finally did test her blood, she had no traces of the poison that everyone else had. So again, so suspicious. There, as you said, Bobby, there was a lot of evidence. There's, maybe the different colored plate is quite anecdotal, but honestly, when you piece it together, it makes perfect sense, right? It really
Sure.
does. There's also GPS data. Prosecutors say that put her in an area where the poisonous mushrooms had been detected. In fact, authorities in the area were so worried about these poisonous mushrooms, they put up all sorts of alerts for people going into the forest and people who want to forage. Please, we have found poisonous mushrooms in the area. Be careful. So it's not like it was a secret little spot that she went to. Everyone was told to avoid this. So, okay.
Yeah, I mean, imagine this. You tell the jury, here's her internet history. She actually accesses the website which showing you the particular areas where these are. And then after that, you track her phone to those exact areas. I mean, that's damning evidence.
Very much so, right? Very much so. But there is even more. The food dehydrating machine. Okay, apparently she bought this a little before the dinner. And then she tossed it in the trash. She claimed to police she didn't have one, but there were 2 things that police found. The owner's manual in the kitchen, hello. The receipt for the purchase of such dehydrator, and then security cameras catch her, dumping it in the trash. Cops retrieve the dehydrator, and they find traces of the poison in that dehydrator. And if she's going to claim it's not hers, they found her fingerprints.
Yeah, damning evidence. I mean, it just tells the whole story. I mean, as a prosecutor, I can imagine you just walk the jury through this whole thing step by step, and it's so clear. And then, like you said, they have your fingerprints, they have you on video dumping machine that you denied ever having, and then the receipt. And I mean, it's just, you just can't fight that kind of evidence to a jury. Any one of those taken in by itself, maybe, but when you look at the totality of telling this story and all of the evidence that they had against her, she had an uphill fight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And here's another weird thing that really bothered authorities. So the reason she had invited her ex and his family to dinner was to explain to them that she was dealing with cancer and that she wanted their help and guidance in explaining it and breaking it to the 2 children that the estranged couple shares. But here's the problem. She doesn't have cancer. There is no cancer.
No, on top of that, She changes her story when they get there, and she apologizes and says, actually, because she's battled her weight her whole life, she says, actually, I'm having gastric band surgery, and that's why, and it's a little embarrassing, and so I wanted to kind of talk to you guys about it and stuff. And then she gives a clinic where she supposedly is going to get this surgery, and the clinic doesn't even do that procedure.
No, it doesn't. So it's just, you can see it all stacking up. And again, if this was, and she still maintained through this entire thing that it was an accident. When finally she was busted for the dehydrator, the receipt, all this other stuff, then she tells authorities her last version of it, and the jury is, I was so embarrassed. I was so embarrassed. I was so overwhelmed. My family is in the hospital. It was my fault. And I should have come clean. I should have said it was my fault. I made a mistake. It was an accident. But as I said, had it been an accident, then she wouldn't have been, picking the deadly mushrooms in the deadly mushroom forest. And she would have come clean, and she would have been trying to help the doctors take care of them. And then there's that final part about how's it possible she ate a piece of the beef Wellington, of course she didn't, without getting sick. Hello?
Yeah, I have to tell you, Anna, when I first heard the story, I actually said, wow, that's pretty ingenious because, you make beef Wellington and you put these, poisonous mushrooms in there. And then maybe you eat a piece of it that doesn't have them or whatever. Because I was thinking this way, you only need one juror to have a reasonable doubt. And somebody could say, well, she didn't know she bought because she claims she bought the mushrooms at a supermarket and she bought a few more at some Asian grocery store, but so I was thinking, well, what you might get through to one juror saying, oh, it was a mistake. She didn't know the mushrooms were poisonous because, I know people who have dogs and the dogs ate certain mushrooms and the dog died from the mushrooms. And so sometimes they just grow wild and you just come across them. But when you have the fact that she went on this website that actually detailed the local community's concerns about, by the way, they call them death cap mushrooms. That's not a name you'd use in the culinary world. And so, and then you have her phone in that area where those death cap mushrooms are growing. And then you find the death cap. I mean, all of that taken together, it's just, it's irrefutable, I think. But when I first heard the story, I'd say, well, this is the genius. This is the old story of, the woman kills her husband with a frozen leg of lamb or something, and then serves it to the detectives, when they come to interview her and they eat the evidence. And so I thought it was something similar to that kind of thing. But then when I read and saw all the evidence that they had, I mean, she wasn't a mastermind, obviously.
Yeah. I've been following this case for some time, and I was debating whether we should cover it earlier on in the case. But I thought, you know what? It's got so many twists to it, and sometimes it isn't until you get to trial that you get some of the great details. So I'm glad that now we can kind of tell the full story as we understand it, because I really think that helps for context. So that is kind of like an overview of the crime. As a crime reporter, I know all of the dangerous and horrible things that can happen to people. So for me, my safety and my peace of mind, being able to see what's going on outside before I actually leave the house, is really important to me. Simply Safe is the home security that I trust. I've been using it for years, and I love the peace of mind that it brings. Simply Safe makes it easy to arm or disarm the system, and I can view the cameras no matter where I am. The monitoring plans start at around $1 per day with no hidden fees. It's affordable, and it doesn't include any type of long-term contract. When it comes to installation, you have options. You can choose to do it yourself or opt for professional installation. One of my favorite things about Simply Safe is their Active Guard outdoor protection. It uses AI to monitor people who approach your home. The cameras can even request urgent police dispatch before a break-in happens. There's a reason Simply Safe has been named Best Home Security Systems by U.S. News and World Report for 5 years in a row and has been recognized for top consumer service by Newsweek and USA Today. Save 50% on your Simply Safe security system when you sign up for a professional monitoring plan, and you get your first month for free. Visit simplysafe.com/truecrime to customize yours. There's no safe like Simply Safe. So the question is, how do we get here? We've got a little background on her. I don't really think it sheds enough light for me, honestly. I'm sorry that she had a tough time growing up, she says. Okay, a lot of people do, but that doesn't mean that we kill the people in our lives who try and help us. That's crazy me. That's what I think. So she grew up in Melbourne. She met Simon Patterson, her ex, in 2004. She found love, happiness. They had 2 children together. Her own parents, apparently she's estranged from them. They did not show up to the wedding. So Erin and Simon married 3 years later in 2007. Like I said, they have 2 children together. She took the stand. She took the stand in her own defense. I say this all the time. If you can explain away the things that don't make sense, then go ahead. Because, when people hear the truth or they hear the other side, it's like, oh. But I think she dug herself deeper in this grave.
Yeah, I think so too. Because like you said, all she did was get up there and cry, woe be me. Look at my life. It's been so bad. And she cried on the stand. And I think she made her testimony, as far as what I've read, more about her than about the victims. And, you have 3 dead people and 1 person who spent like 3 weeks in ICU in very much pain and survived. But, who didn't, obviously, well, good people. One's a pastor that, and so she really didn't have and not that you'd ever have a good reason to kill somebody, but you couldn't figure out any reason, anything. Like if this wasn't a spouse that's angry at her ex-spouse because they're with somebody new or they took custody of the kids or anything, it was really hard, no motivation to just be so callously indifferent to these people's lives. And then to get up there and make it all about you, what a hard life you had. Well, I mean, that could never carry weight with most people I know that say, oh, you know what, you did have a bad life, take the life of these 3 innocent people. I mean, it's just, it boggles the mind what she was thinking.
Yeah. She said, she admitted, she said many of the problems in their marriage were because of her. She said she had low self-esteem and weight issues that have plagued her. In 2009, Simon and Erin, this is what's so bizarre. They were on a road trip across Australia and they had a newborn son at the time. And all of a sudden, Erin just takes off, leaves Simon with the baby and just takes off, right? Very bizarre. They had a few short separations, and finally in 2015, they agreed to permanently separate, however, to remain legally married. And I know couples that do that. They do that for insurance purposes. They do that for all sorts of reasons. And generally, the couples that do that, for the most part, manage to get along, right? Otherwise, you just want to sever all ties. Okay. Now, here's something else that really is fascinating, and this was not presented to the jury. According to the reporting of the Associated Press, Erin tried to poison poor Simon at least 3 times before, dating back to 2021. These charges, however, the attempted poisoning charges were actually dropped on the eve of this trial for the murder charges. So the jury never heard that alleged evidence. Now, come on.
That's so bizarre to me. And I wonder if the husband, obviously he knew when the charges were filed, but at the time of the attempted poisoning, whether he knew that. Because if that were the case, I certainly would have advised my parents against having dinner with her. It's bizarre to me that you would, first of all, still stay in contact. And then second of all, like in this particular case, I mean, I would have certainly advised the parents not to go near her and certainly ingest anything that she offers them to eat or drink, because she's tried to poison him before. So I would wonder, did he know it at the time? I don't know when those charges were filed. And I think they were probably dropped because obviously the more serious charges were the charges in this trial, and they were pretty confident they were going to get a conviction here, so they dismissed those charges before. But the background of those charges would be interesting. I'm sure obviously he feels devastated for losing his parents, but I wonder if there was something he could have warned them about, particularly in light of these prior attempts at poisoning him.
Yeah, my gut tells me he probably didn't know in real time that he was being poisoned. He likely had food poisoning or something like that. And then when you look back and you're like, well, hold on a second. Each time that happened, I was with her. Or right. Each time that, I don't know if that's exactly it, but this is just my theory. So sure. I think that's very logical. So let's get to the day. the day of this luncheon. It's July 29th of 2023, and Erin has invited Simon and Simon's family over to her home for this lunch. It's, she's really worked on this meal because, again, she's making a beef Wellington here. It's not like she just, threw a little something out there. Simon wisely said no. So what's interesting here is when she served the beef Wellington, she also had it accompanied with mashed potatoes, green beans, and gravy. And remember, she had this different plate, and then she saves poor Simon a plate in the refrigerator. The whole story about the cancer, she, reveals is not true. It's something else, but that's not true either. Okay, that's how the meal went down. That night, the guests at this luncheon started to get ill. 4 of them went to the hospital. 2 days later, Erin decides, maybe I should go to the hospital too. I don't feel so good. And the doctors are determined to keep her there and don't want to release her, and she refused to stay. And the doctors went so far, I believe, because I listened to this audio recording, the doctors called the police because they were worried. They had 3 people who were in grave condition dying because of what appears, trying to figure out what it was, food poisoning. Well, really, it was mushroom poisoning. And they were afraid something terrible was going to happen to her, and they didn't want her released. So this thing got on police radar very, very quickly. Very, very quickly. And again, if you're doing a cover-up, wouldn't you be worried for yourself? Wouldn't you be afraid that you might get sick and die?
Yeah, she didn't plan it very well. This was not a very well planned thing. She didn't have any prior history of criminality. She didn't kind of know what she was doing. Her attempts at what we would call forensic countermeasures were, very immature. She just didn't know what she was doing, and it led a big trail. Somebody that knew what they were doing probably would have made themselves sick. Maybe not with the death cap mushrooms, but used something else that mimicked those symptoms and literally made themselves sick, and maybe stayed in the hospital a day or two. You have to, because, the doctors knew right away that whatever these 3 or 4 people now were sick with, this person here does not have the same thing. They're complaining about similar symptoms, but they're not manifesting. She's not throwing up. She's not vomiting. She's not dehydrating. And so there are no symptoms. And they knew at that point that these 5 people had a meal, and those 4 people over there did not ingest the same thing as this 5th person. Mm-hmm. That's medical. That's medical proof right there.
And they did find remnants of the beef Wellington in the trash. And the authorities say they found the deadly mushrooms in the beef Wellington. So it's in the dehydrator, right? It's in the actual dinner. So as we said at the top, there's no disputing it. They died because of eating this. The question is, was it an accident or was it intentional? And this is the evidence that was presented that made the jury think, yeah, this was intentional.
Yeah, the defense didn't seem to proffer any alternative theory other than it didn't happen. That she didn't put death cap mushrooms in that beef Wellington. Well, clearly they were in there. Clearly she made that dish. So they didn't seem to offer, even through her own testimony, they didn't seem to offer any kind of alternative that the jury could even hang their hat on. Even if one juror wanted to say, oh yeah, it looks like this happened, but actually this happened. It didn't seem like the defense even went through the labor of presenting an alternative theory of what happened.
Yeah. The prosecution even presented something she posted on a true crime Facebook group. I suppose you could talk about recipes there, but this is an odd one. She wrote, quote, "I've been hiding powdered mushrooms in everything mixed into chocolate brownies. Yesterday, the kids had no idea." Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's scary because number one, she could have done that. Now you have to start going back and looking at the kids. Have they ever had any kind of, symptoms of, even minor poisoning or something like that? That what Munchausen's like proxy. You don't know what was going through this woman's head. So, the fact that she did now, we know, murder her in-laws and her husband's aunt, maybe what she said on that thing was true. And maybe the kids, I don't know what her motivation would have been for the kids either, but maybe, she was doing a trial run or something. When I read that she posted that, I'm like, well, that's bizarre, because why would you hurt your own children? But
yeah,
you don't
why?
know.
Exactly. It's very, very strange. Then there's this other issue. So police say that on the day of this poisonous luncheon, that Erin was using 3 cell phones, but police only found one, and that one that was turned over to police appeared to have been wiped a few times. Fascinating. Why? Who needs 3 cell phones?
And who wipes their cell phone? I mean, other than when you get a new one and like my phone I've had for probably a year, I wiped my last one before I sent it back in a trade-in, and I started my new one, but I'm not going to wipe my new one until I get a newer one than that. And then I wipe the old one before I send it back in. That's the only time anybody that isn't committing crimes, should have to wipe their phone. Why would you wipe your phone 3 times? It doesn't make sense unless you're trying to hide something.
Exactly. And that one cell phone where she wiped, the evidence clean, which of course you can never really do, that's the one that provided the cell phone data that put her in the location of those deadly mushrooms. So Erin eventually does get arrested here. Sadly, we have the deaths of her in-laws and of her aunt, and the pastor survives. So Erin gets arrested in November of 2023 and charged with the deaths of Don, Gail, and Heather, and then the attempted murder of Ian. She pleads not guilty to the charges. And finally the case, because everyone's been talking about this, finally goes to trial in 2025. Again, her defense was a little all over the place, other than the point was it was an accident. She never planned to hurt anyone. She loved them. She even testified how much she loved them, and she was crying as she's talking about the Patterson family. She admits to the lies. She admits to all of that on the stand. Yes, I had the dehydrator. Okay, fine. She admits to everything. But at the end of the day, she did not explain how it was possible that she was the only one who didn't die from the tainted beef Wellington. The jury convicted Erin on 3 counts of murder, along with 1 count of attempted murder on July 7th of this year. The reporters in the courtroom said that Erin showed little to no reaction to the verdict when it was read. She kept her gaze on the jury, and then she looked ahead calmly as the fate was revealed. Sentencing will be sometime next month, and the defense now has 28 days to try and file an appeal, and I don't know on what grounds, but everyone, I guess, has a right to an appeal. We understand that.
Yeah, I think they probably could have charged her with a second attempted murder of her ex-husband, because she actually prepared his dish and then put it in the refrigerator just in case he showed up. So she took the steps necessary to kill him. They probably felt they didn't need that extra charge, but I think she's going to face a very long prison sentence. I think that the only chance her defense might have is to present some kind of mental defect to impact sentencing, that if, have her serve her time in some kind of psychiatric facility or things like that, if that's available under the Australian system, I do not know. But I think that that's probably the best avenue for them to go down at this point, considering the evidence that's in the record. I think that, her only hope to not spend the maximum amount of time in jail under these charges is probably to, throw herself on the mercy of the court and maybe ask for some psychiatric treatment in incarceration.
Well, let's just hope that she is never assigned to work in the prison kitchen. Okay? Because
Good point.
Okay, this is for sure trouble.
Good point. Didn't think of that.
Now, this case doesn't exactly end here. Of course, we don't know what sentencing will be. But it has another component to it which really fascinates me, okay? All right. The judge in this case was absolutely furious with the coverage of the case during the trial because of inflammatory comments by shock jocks and podcasters, essentially convicting Erin during the trial, which he, the judge, feared could have reached jurors. And there were also events. Look, we know in the world of, freedoms of speech that lots of people can say a lot of things. I always, this will never be a podcast that goes to the extreme. You want that? This isn't for you. We stick to the facts as we know them and the evidence. We share some theories, emotional reactions, but we're a little careful here. So the judge was extraordinary. The judge was so mad. And apparently in Australia, you can actually file criminal charges for these actions. And the judge has taken this step and forwarded the case to the prosecuting officials because the judge is so angry. The judge wrote, quote, this is brilliant. I encourage all commentators to engage their brains before they open their mouths, as they may otherwise land themselves and their organizations in hot water. I will be referring this morning's matter to the Office of Public Prosecution for contempt proceedings. I'm okay
that's very
with this.
different from our system. I mean,
Right.
we rarely see anything like that. I think maybe their view of freedom of speech is a little more constrained than ours. Ours is much more absolute. But even, I read where the doctor that treated her in the emergency room had given and he was a witness at the trial, had given a few interviews where he was pretty cursed. He used some curse words in his descriptions of her, did not like her, and said some things. And now he's under investigation by the medical board for unprofessional conduct. And his medical license, although no discipline has taken place so far, from what I understand, they are investigating him for an ethics violation through the medical board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really, and there is a part of me, what I kind of like about what the judge is doing here is forcing some accountability, right? Forcing some accountability to your actions, as if we live like there are no consequences. And I believe, and obviously when we're dealing with murder, there are serious consequences. Now, Erin is not the victim here, but let's look at fairness.
But everyone's entitled to that fair trial,
Yes,
right? I mean,
yes.
that's the whole bottom line. And you don't look, having been on the prosecution side, you don't ever want your prosecution to be tainted by anything. Like we always felt, the strength of our case is through the evidence we're going to put into the record. We don't need a public campaign to tarnish the defendant. We're going to do that in court through the record, through the evidence that we're going to put in front of a jury. We don't need all of that other stuff that's going to, maybe taint a jury pool or cause any kind of different confusion. So, that defendant, we always went to great lengths to make sure the defendant was going to have that fair trial because we were confident in our evidence. We were confident we were going to get the conviction. And any of that other stuff, first of all, it doesn't lead to a conviction. The only thing that is important is what's in the record. And then second of all, we didn't want any kind of appellate issues. We didn't want any kind of appeal issues, going forward. And so we tried to we went through great pains to make sure that the defendant had every opportunity to have a fair trial through the discovery process, through exculpatory information being turned over, and all of that kind of stuff. And I understand the insatiable appetite of the public in the true crime world and things, but it does get to a point where, we don't need people traipsing around crime scenes because they have a podcast and they're going to somebody found a glove outside the Idaho house. And, we don't need, the police generally don't need that. We don't need that much help. If we need help, we go to the right people to get it. And I understand there have been some cases that have been solved by, what they call internet detectives and things like that. And some of them do very good work. But once you get charges filed, boy, everything is laser focused on the trial and really laser focused on the defendant's rights being preserved because you need to have that trial very sanitary. You need the rights to be protected both for at the trial and in the post-trial appellate process. And so really it's very important for us once the charges are filed that, the prosecutor's office is the only one that speaks for the state or for the government, against the defendant and usually only through court papers or through court appearances and things, because everything else is white noise. It's actually worse than white noise because it could be dangerous to the case.
Yeah, the judge actually asked the jury, were you at all exposed to any of these podcasts, the radio show, and also there was an event that was held? And the jury said no, which I think is important because when we look at appeals, the possibility that somehow the jury may have been tainted by the public rhetoric, the judge, got on the record they were not exposed to it, which is important. These clips have all been taken down. The judge ordered them taken down, and all the different media organizations involved here, they have not responded other than to have taken down the controversial content. I think it's interesting that the judge added one more thing. I reminded media and podcasts that ignorance of the law is no excuse. And I remind them that the court's media team will continue to monitor coverage of this trial to safeguard the trial's integrity. Additionally, the judge pointed out that in some of these clips and some of this content that the judge found so upsetting, there was incorrect information about evidence that had been presented. Was that an error? We all make mistakes. Or was the evidence just discarded and became just part of opinion? I don't really know. I just thought it was an interesting part of this case. And I wonder how this judge would have handled the Karen Reed case, because, that's our other extreme, right? Where everyone is having a discourse.
I think you're right. I think that it's such a contrast with the two systems, because our system, I don't think a judge would ever go to that length and admonish, because we hold our First Amendment in such high esteem and sacrosanct. I'm a very big supporter of that, but I'm also, I've been on the prosecution side. I've been an investigator, and now in 2023, I served as a juror on a murder case. And so I know what that's like. I was a juror for a 5-month murder trial. And the judge every night admonished us not to look at the newspapers, not to look at anything online. And the murder took place here in Palm Springs, where I live. And so we were all from the area, and they said, don't drive by the address, because you're going to hear the victim's address where he was murdered 1,000 times throughout these 5 months, and don't drive by the address. And so, so now I have not only an investigator's perspective, and as a lawyer, I have the prosecutor's perspective, but I also have a juror's perspective in a murder trial, murder with special circumstances, which is the highest charge in California. I was a juror on that trial for 5 months, and I became the jury foreman. And so now I have that perspective as well, is that you can't consider anything that happens outside the courtroom. You have to, what we call the four corners of the record that's presented during the trial. And that's the only thing you can consider. And it's partly for what you said. A lot of these people online pontificate, and they get the law wrong, they get the facts wrong, and they make certain assumptions that you just can't make in the law. And if I advise people, go and sit in a trial, even if just go and sit in a courtroom. We used to have courtroom watchers all the time. We called them, when I worked in the Eastern District of New York. We see the same people, and it's actually very entertaining. And you could go, of course, we had John Gotti at that time, but you can go and sit in a courtroom, look at trials, watch trials, because it's not anything like you see on TV. Very few gotcha moments. I'm a writer too in Hollywood now, and there's like a lot of gotcha moments. They love to have and I wrote a courtroom scene for Nicole Kidman at one point, and they love the gotcha moments. But in reality, there's very few gotcha moments in trials, because you have to hand everything over to the defense, not only through discovery, but if you have new evidence comes up during trial, they have a right to see it and then have a certain amount of time to look at it and investigate it and stuff. So there are very few of those gotcha moments in trials. And so I think that people have a real misperception, unless they've been through a trial or sat through a trial or been a juror, about what happens inside a courtroom. And I advise people that want to do that or get into the podcasting world like that in the true crime, go and sit in a number of criminal trials and learn what the law is, what the hearsay law is, what witnesses can say and can't say, and things like that. And I think you'll do your audience a service, because you'll be better educated about how things work, and you won't say things that people like me look at as ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. So how long did you deliberate for? That's fascinating.
We went out, we got instructions Monday morning. We went out after lunch on Monday, and we came back right after lunch on Tuesday.
Wow.
And we had 10 counts. We had murder with special circumstances, and then a bunch of fraud and robbery counts and things like that. So lesser included offenses.
So I'm curious, how did you find your fellow jurors? Because I have such great, respect for jurors. It's a hard job, and they really are limited to a small box. They don't hear all the stuff that we do.
Yeah, and it was our trial was 5 months, so like we got to know each other. We got really to know each other. We, you're together. We went to lunch sometimes together, but all the time the judge said you can't talk about the case, even on breaks, even on lunch. We weren't allowed to talk to each other about the case until deliberations. That's the first time you're allowed to talk to each other. So we got to know each other very well as human beings and families and things like that, because you're not allowed to talk about the case. And so, my fellow jurors, I found them to be very attentive. We had a lot of cell phone technical data. We had FBI agents come in and testify from our computer, response teams. A lot of cell phone data. This was a state case, but it was fascinating. We had several different crime scene technicians come in and testify. It was 5 months. It was a lot of testimony, but I found my fellow jurors to be, super attentive. And when we got into the jury room, everybody had a really good handle on the evidence. And I give the prosecution a lot of credit because in summation, they had 5 months of evidence to have to kind of make sense of. And they really did a good job graphically on the big screen to kind of walk us through it again, because after 5 months, even my own head was a little foggy with all the different things that we had. I knew the stuff was there, but the prosecutor did a great job in summation about tying it all together and putting the picture up there on the case. And so we went in there and, our first vote was 11-1. And then just one person said, look, this guy's going to be in jail for the rest of his life on a conviction. I just want to make sure we get it all right. And we did. We spent about 8 or 10 hours over 2 days breaking out the binders. We had all the bindings. We had the records. We didn't send any questions back to the judge, but we did look through a lot of the evidence. And we had some very rigorous discussions about certain things in there. And then, but by the end, there wasn't a reasonable doubt in the room.
Wow, that's amazing. I've never been picked for a jury because the judges always ding me.
Yeah, well, me too. I mean, I always show up. Right. Because they hear I was a former law enforcement for 30 years and I'm an attorney. I mean, those two things alone. But look, I went through voir dire. The defense attorney knew my background. There was a big questionnaire like this thick we had to fill out. And they came in, they knew all about me. The defense attorney on voir dire, which is the questioning you go through before you're on the jury, asked me about my background, asked me about, a lot of my stuff and could have, dismissed me from the jury. He had preemptory challenges left. He could have dismissed me from the jury, but he didn't. And I
Interesting.
Yeah.
I had this conversation with a judge once, and the judge said to me, since you're a journalist, an investigative journalist, just want to talk about how do you think you'd be a good juror? And I said, well, there's just one thing I want to make clear here. Because I am an investigative reporter, I always feel that something else is lurking or missing somewhere. And I said, I've also covered enough trials where I know only a portion of what actually happens in a case is presented to the jury. But it's what doesn't make it in there that is sometimes crucial and important to the overall case. And then the judge said goodbye to you. Because your mind is going to fill in the blanks. Yes. Right? I mean, that's what you do. It's already filling in. That's what, and then a good journalist will go in and fill those blanks in for their readers or their viewers or stuff. And that's your job. I would imagine it would be very hard to dismiss those glaring things. It would be hard for your mind not to fill in, they probably got this or this probably happened, because you've seen it so much before. And that's the oftentimes you hear, we should have professional jurors. And that's the danger of that, is that you see so many trials, you kind of start knowing what's going to happen, and although most of the time that's going to be true, there may be a time or two that's not. And so your prior experience may color your judgment in the instant case, and then you don't want that happening, because then a defendant might not get a fair shake. Yeah. But that's why I found the whole process after all the time that I did in law enforcement and my time learning the law and teaching the law, I really found the experience as a juror really fascinating and really worthwhile. Wow. Wow. Thanks for sharing that. That really, to me, that's what I always want to hear about. What's the experience like? How did you guys figure this out? Fascinating. Well, this woman is definitely going to be spending a lot of time in prison, and rightfully so, because 3 beautiful people have lost their lives and 1 nearly lost his. It is time for our comment section. These are the crime cases that you all are talking about on social media, and here's our producer, Will Updike. Hey, Will, how are you?
Good. How's it going, Anna?
Good.
Good to see you, Bobby. I'm glad you're joining us, even though you're a little banged up. We really appreciate it.
That's all right. That's all right. There's very little I can do nowadays, but sit here, So I'm glad to be here.
We'll hope we can help you pass the time a little bit with a little bit of fun. This week we have a case. It's kind of like the setup to the joke that doesn't have a punchline yet. We're going to just say it's a man with a raccoon walks into a bar. This case comes out of Murray, Kentucky, where a man stands accused of releasing a raccoon at a bar that, get this, he wasn't allowed to be in.
The raccoon or the man?
The man. We're gonna get into all of that, but this unfolded on the evening of June 6th, where officers responded to the Big Apple Grill and Bar there in Murray, Kentucky, for a report of a person bit by a raccoon that had been intentionally, they say, released into the establishment. So officers go looking for the suspect who allegedly released this raccoon. And like I said, this guy apparently already wasn't allowed to be in this bar, so he's not particularly hard to find. They know who he is. The suspect here is Jonathan Mason. Officers are able to find Jonathan, and they attempt to perform a traffic stop on his vehicle, which is like here where things get a little bit more complicated. He reportedly refuses to exit the car, and things kind of seem to escalate here. So, according to police, Jonathan has multiple misdemeanor cases going on right now. They allegedly all sort of involve stuff under the influence of alcohol, and apparently some of their interactions with him before have involved a wielding of firearms. So they're
Where's
not really,
the raccoon, though? Where's the raccoon?
The raccoon has been taken at this point. The raccoon is gone. The raccoon is out of the story.
So the raccoon is not in the car. That's all I wanted to know.
No, the raccoon was left in the bar.
Okay. He's thrown back a couple back there.
Yeah, it started doing its own thing. Jonathan here apparently decided to split. So he's allegedly knocking out of his car. Officers break the driver's side window and remove him from the vehicle. But what they didn't realize was that the truck that he was in neutral. So at this point, it begins to roll and hits a police vehicle. And apparently there was some damage there. As a side note, they later found out that this truck Jonathan was driving was apparently also not insured. So Jonathan. Now, Jonathan is known as Cowboy Cody in the local community. I think he does some different events. There's pictures of him, riding horses down Main Street. Some of these antics, seem to be sanctioned. Some seem to be, less sanctioned. But he gained a bunch of notoriety locally during a 4-day stretch last December, where he racked up multiple misdemeanor charges for riding a mule to multiple bars, and even allegedly trying to evade police on said mule at one point. And again, officers say this was all under the influence of alcohol, so he's got some pending cases on that. But back to the latest incident at the Big Apple Grill and Bar. Officers, they managed to detain Jonathan. He reportedly sustained some minor injuries, and he was transported to a local hospital, quickly released. He's since been booked in the Callaway County Jail on charges of second-degree assault, criminal trespassing, resisting arrest, and failure to maintain required insurance for this previous kind of alleged spree here. He's still facing charges of disorderly conduct, alcohol intoxication in a public space, and criminal trespassing and resisting arrest. So a lot going on there. But yeah, the raccoon kind of phases out of the story. Not really sure what his fate was, but hopefully, I don't know.
Well, if he bit someone, probably not good.
Someone? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think raccoons can carry rabies, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, I'm sure they can.
Yeah.
I'm so curious, was this an act of revenge or something? I don't get,
was this like a pet that he brought in? They said, hey, you got to go. You're barred from this place. Your raccoon can stay, or something like that. How did the raccoon get in there? Did he take it in there as a pet, or did he want it to bite somebody knowing it was, going to be scared or something? Because
had he trained it perhaps to get a beer for him, it was gonna meet him outside when things went
because you just
haywire.
can't catch a raccoon. I mean, well, this guy obviously has some talent.
Cowboy Cody, I think, can catch a raccoon.
Cowboy Cody probably has his way, but it's bizarre that you would use a raccoon in that context. I mean, especially you go into a bar that you've already been banned from. So I wonder what his motivation was to bring the raccoon in there, other than to just cause chaos.
Yeah, you would think.
It's funny, you say like he tried to elude police on a donkey. A horse maybe, but a donkey, they're not known to, I don't see a donkey like going down the stretch, as a thoroughbred. Like a chase on a donkey, I don't really see that as being productive.
Maybe it was he was going for a stamina thing. It's like it's an OJ speed type chase, but he's going for the long haul of this one.
Oh my Lord.
Yeah.
But people in the comments, they had a lot of questions about how he acquired this raccoon. What was the situation there? Who was really in control? Sandy B wants to know, did he release the raccoon or did it just get away from him? Which I think is a super valid question. Like Bobby said, like, was he trying to just incite a little chaos here perhaps? Or was he trying to enter the bar perhaps with a new friend and things went a little haywire. We already talked a little bit about his alleged catching of this raccoon. Miss Lonnie said, I mean, he caught a raccoon. They should give him a job at animal control. And, I'm thinking maybe with these raccoons, the mules, he's got sort of a thing going on here. Maybe it's not a bad line of work to look into. We got some comments on this guy's mugshot. So you can imagine, Cowboy Cody here, he looks a little rough and tumble. He's got a big scraggly beard. In this mugshot, he looks maybe a little roughed up. Who knows what he was up to? Who knows if the raccoon was scratching him or something?
Well, they had to pull him out of a broken window of a car, right?
Yeah,
so usually
exactly.
So he's got that way. Yeah,
he's got some scratches and stuff. But Jeff S said, guy was stuck in Jumanji for 30 years. Give him a break. He does look a little bit like Robin Williams when he, shows up as a 30-whatever-year-old man and has to shave and everything for the first time. Brittany L brought this up. They said, oh my God, why did I think this was Bill Pullman? I don't know that I fully see the resemblance there, but I love a Bill Pullman mention. He for a period of time was a professor at Montana State University. I grew up in Montana, and that experience actually encouraged him to pursue acting more seriously. Don't know if it was to get out of Montana or he just felt his calling there. I got to close this last one out on a creative one. Bobby as a screenwriter, I'm curious your take on this. Big Yum Yum said he needs his own movie, a crazy mountain man who has woodland critters going into towns, robbing them. Anyone that tries to stop him gets wild animals coming to his defense. And then they've outlined sort of a climax scene here. At the end of the movie, he's having a police standoff at a waterfall cliff, holding hands with a bear. He says, "This is it, buddy." They both jump. It's like they got a bit of a Thelma and Louise thing going on here with Cowboy Cody and the bear.
I mean, a little bit like a dark Dr. Dolittle kind of way. But I certainly would think that on the unscripted side, you could certainly have follow him around. There are enough of these exotic vet shows where you can watch an exotic vet go and treat all these weird animals. I mean, this guy's handling enough weird animals that I just put a live crew on him and follow him around. And,
just put a camera on them, kind of when the people do on Instagram with the cats. Those are my favorite videos.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Just put a camera around him or on his head.
Yeah, he's got an unscripted show right there. I mean, he's his own unscripted show right there.
He'll be big on TikTok.
Yeah, huge.
Yeah, if what police say is true about this alleged 4-day crime spree, I think a GoPro through all of that would have been you could have sold that pretty easily.
And he's missing the boat if he doesn't have merch already. He's got to put out some merch with that beard, his beard and the face and the raccoon up here on the corner or something.
Oh my Lord!
He could be doing well in the merch field.
Yeah. I wonder if that's been posed to him. But that is going to do it for this week's comment section. Anna, do you have some additional comments you'd like to share?
Well, can we talk about my birdhouse by Mike?
Of course, yes.
Stand by. Let me go get it. Let me unplug and get. It's very heavy, everyone. Very heavy.
It's got like a steeple. What does it got on top?
That's what I was thinking.
That's a big. What the? Oh yeah.
Wait.
Now, is this more of a bird church than
Can
a
you
bird
hear
house?
the bell? Let me get my headphones back on.
Yeah.
Okay, so those of you who don't know Mike King, he's a former law enforcement expert. He's taken down cults. He's saved children. He's done everything. And he just recently retired from his last job. And he started making birdhouses.
Aww.
Bell.
It's even got a bell.
I know. Look at this. Isn't it fabulous?
Oh.
It's as heavy as all get out. He brought this on the plane from Utah to LA. I'd never, I meet all of our folks virtually. I have these virtual relationships with all of you, but really I've never met many of you in person. So he's here working on something for the History Channel. And I said, Mike, I'd love to meet you. Let me take you out for dinner. And then he was telling me and Will last time he was on about how he started making these birdhouses and that he... It was going to make
and you've
me
got a bird poster back there along your wall.
Oh, yeah, I do. That's covering up a tangle of cords. And people are like, what's wrong with you? Why don't you hang it up? I'm like, after 5 years, people, you must realize it's there for a reason.
It's intentional.
It's intentional.
Yeah, that's a quite detailed birdhouse. He spent some time on that.
I know.
Yeah. He makes a lot of really cool birdhouses. I was talking to him a little bit about it because I'm interested in anyone who's like making something, and he's happy with the way they're coming out, but he says they're not necessarily attracting a lot of birds, so they're more decorative.
I think most people I know with birdhouses, they want them for the decorative.
Yeah, I've tried to put up birdhouses my whole life, and never have I had a bird actually, nest in there. I think I might just leave it as part of the podcast studio here.
It looks great inside the house.
Right?
I like it.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah,
I'm
I've
just
appeared
so
many
impressed.
times with Mike. I've appeared on many, many shows with Mike. We talk often, quite actually.
Well, hopefully you're next in line for a birdhouse. Hopefully I'm getting one at some point.
That's right. Tell Mike, and he'll make you a birdhouse. The man will transport it on the airplane. How he got through TSA, I'll never know.
I'd love to see that scan.
There's Mike King, former cop carrying this giant birdhouse for Ana Garcia of True Crime News.
That's funny. I didn't know that's what he was doing now.
He's a funny guy. Yeah, he just started it. He just started doing this in the last few months.
But that will do it for this week's comment section. Thank you, everybody who sent those in. You can do that over on our YouTube community page. You can also reach out to us at any time on social media at My True Crime News. You can also comment on this video, any of our videos. Anna reads your comments. But until next week, don't do crime.
Well, Bobby, this has been so much fun to have you on. You're fascinating. You've always got a great take.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Just such a pleasure. Bobby, I know that you are in, healing from your shoulder surgery, but I know that you've always got a lot of stuff cooking. Anything you're working on right now, and how can people follow you?
Oh, yeah. Well, they can follow me on X at Bobby Chacon FBI. My website is www.bobbychacon.com. It's easy. And I'm also have my own YouTube channel. Not much on there now. I'm toying with the idea of just doing a kind of a weekly roundup of the crimes of the week kind of thing on what happened, and just, a 10 or 15 minute my take, because I get often asked. I mean, tomorrow I'm on something, and then I've got I'm doing the Koberger thing live. When is that? The 23rd, with somebody, Law and Crime maybe. And so I get asked for a lot of the trials and a lot of stuff. And I may get called on this case we covered today, because I do a lot of stuff for Australian TV on the Today Show Australia and Sunrise Australia. They're two morning programs, and so I'm on them quite often. But other than that, I'm writing my own screenwriting, trying to pitch my movies and my TV shows and things like that, which is a tough road to hoe, but it's enjoyable.
Yeah. Oh, fascinating. It's always a pleasure having you on. It really is. And I hope someday that I will meet you in person.
Yeah. Actually, look, I'm in LA all the time. So, yeah.
Oh, that was so funny. Right. Well, you have to bring a gift.
Not a birdhouse, but maybe a bird now.
I'm just saying. I mean, Mike has set the bar
Mike set
pretty
the bar
high.
kind of high. Yeah.
It's like he was comparing again. Well, you can find me at Anna G News. We're so easy to find everywhere on social media. It's My True Crime News, at My True Crime News. Super simple. This podcast, all our podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to join the community that's quite vocal local, YouTube is the place because everybody just jumps on and shares their thoughts. And I always love to hear your thoughts on things because a lot of times, I may not see everything from every angle. So I just love your comments, and I do try and respond. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also at truecrimenews.com, we have a newsletter. You can subscribe there. So until next week, this is True Crime News, the podcast. I'm your host, Ana Garcia. Crime never stops, and neither do we.